So it comes as no surprise that Mario Cristobal wants a lot of control. And so
Hmm.
that's what I was reading into your statement initially about Alonso Highsmith having less of a role than he originally did under Manny Diaz.
Hmm.
Do you see that as that being a positive, that you have the faith and trust in Mario Cristobal going beyond his coaching duties, especially in this ever increasingly complicated world of college football,
Hmm.
and taking on maybe more than is wise?
In for a dime, in for a dollar. Like, we fired a decently successful coach. Wasn't necessarily championship level, but like, Manny Diaz wasn't the worst coach that we've seen. You know what I mean? But like, you get him up out of there, you do all these other things, and whatnot. So like, you believe it or you don't. And so like, I'm just saying, yeah, like you gotta go with the whole picture with Cristobal. So if you're in for the dime, then I'm in for the dollar. So like, if this is how he wants to run it, and again, like we talked about how it was a raise it to the ground and re-pour a new foundation as opposed to just like tweaking paint colors on the trim or something, as terms of the sprucing up of this program. So like operationally, it's completely different. The structure is very similar, but has had some tweaks. So I don't necessarily think it's too much. I mean, like, is the operational stuff going to curtail Mario from developing as an on-field, in-game coach? That's the concern. You know what I mean? Like, if you want someone to build a program, like Cristobal knows how to do it. He was there with Saban. He went and obviously like, or I'm not saying that he built Oregon, right? But he made Oregon into his image and everything. So he tweaked that and whatever, because that was a more functional organization. But had them at high operations to the point that Dan Lanning has taken that and continued that because he left him with a wonderful operation and everything. Not saying that Lanning hasn't made tweaks, because he has, but he was left with a high caliber organization there. So yeah, I don't think that he's biting off more than he can chew, but like from an organizational standpoint, but does he with that have the room for real self-study and improvement as an on-field in-game coach? Because that is the thing that is holding everything back. We're going to go recruit these guys. We're going to hire a all-star staff. We're going to get the best coaches that are, like, from all of these things of talent acquisition and structure. There are a few of the caliber of Mario Cristobal. But it's funny, I was talking, shout out to my boy Fred, I know he's going to watch this, but we were talking on the phone earlier today. Clemson is looked at, and this will make sense in a second. Clemson is looked at as one of the favorites in the ACC. For why? Don't think that they have the dudes anymore. Don't think they really have anything else, but they're getting a game or two bump for the lifetime achievement or recent achievement of Dabo Swinney and the accomplishments that he's had. Conversely, for Miami, right, the talent is there. You got the number one quarterback, like returning in the country, probably. I mean, he's top 2 or 3, right? He was number 4 in yards per game last year. I actually just had this up. Let me go make sure that I have that stat right. National passing. Cam Ward was 4th in the country with 311.3 yards per game passing last year. The 3 people in front of him, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, and Jaden Daniels. Hello, guys. Right? So this is the guy that you get. You have this wide open ass schedule. You got 5-star blue chip kind of talent everywhere, right? And when the number comes out for over under, it's probably going to be what, 8.5, maybe 8, right? But that's probably a game or two depression or lowering regression from what it should be. Why? Because of Cristobal's struggles as an on-field in-game coach. And that's how important that part of things is. So you can do all the organizational things, and I think that he does, and he handles those and operates those well. But unless or until you get better as an on-field coach, it's still going to show up in a negative way, as opposed to Clemson, where, like, respectfully, the golden age of Clemson is over. They're still a very good team. They're still a very good team. They can and will beat you. They're still a very good team. But this is not national championship peak golden age Clemson anymore. Ain't no Deshaun Watson. Ain't no Trevor Lawrence. All those things that we've been talking about for years where they hit on every recruit. They had perfect development. They barely had any injuries. The one injury they had was Mike Williams, but then they had other dudes at wide receiver that year. They had generational quarterback after generational quarterback after 1 year of Kelly Bryant, after generational quarterback, and all those things. That golden age is not here anymore. Yet and still, they're looked at in a very positive light because of the successes of that coach, what he's done on field, in game, and Mario Cristobal has had the opposite effect with this team, and that's the part of running everything that I think needs more attention rather than, okay, I'm taking this big role organizationally because he's proven that he can handle that part. I need you to handle this part on, 5 acres of grass, 53 and a third by 120 yards, including the end zones. That's the part that I need you to get better at, buddy.
Yeah, Clemson is coming off of, off the top of my head, 9-3, 10-2, 8-4 the last 3 seasons with postseason losses after averaging roughly a loss per year for 6 seasons, 7 seasons. All right, so I had one question in my pocket, but I'm going to hit you with this since you brought up Clemson. So you would roughly put Clemson and Miami's rosters currently going into this season on the same tier, just the roster talent, production, ability.
Miami above Clemson in that tier, but yes, in the same tier. Sure.
Okay. Next question would be, in terms of Mario Cristobal, whether you gave him just a complete blank slate when he walked on campus and thought, I'm strictly evaluating him now for what he does here, or you had, let's say, I would guess it would be a more favorable impression than it would be a negative impression based on what he accomplished at Oregon. What has been your general timeline of his good favor or negative favor in your eyes? How is that? What are the peaks? What are the valleys? Where do you stand on Mario Cristobal in your evaluation of him running a program today versus when he started? And what have been those high moments that have given you pause for, okay, he is the man, this is going to happen, versus the valleys where you've thought, I have my questions, my concerns?
The peaks are National Signing Day, all 3 of them, bringing in, elite talent. I know the first class was, very small because, he got hired in January, but fine. Or December, whenever it was, but, not long before the February signing day, but after early signing, or right at early, 2 days before early signing, whatever it was. Anyways, it was a short time. But yeah, the talent acquisition days, the signing days, high note. The Texas A&M game this past year, high note, absolutely. You go toe to toe with a very talented team. You beat them and everything. So that was a high note, and you really love that. The overall trajectory, I would say, positive, especially because we have more wins year over year since he's been here. However, the Georgia Tech game, the low, that's an all-time joke. That's an all-time fuck up. You know what I mean? You snatch defeat from the hands of victory, and then it's just but again, that just shows the lack of acumen as an on-field coach, and then he starts the press conference by throwing Don Chaney Jr. under the bus, and then saw his brain and said, "Well, we coach 2 hands on the ball, but it's my fault and everything, and then." The whole, we have processes in place. So what's the process? Well, we're not going to go into it. So how did the process fail? So what are we going to do about that process if we have processes in place and you didn't call that timeout and you didn't do those things? And then he wants to be like, you know what? whatever. Okay, was it Coach Dawson then? Like, it was my call. So you were trying to get the kid a 100-yard game for vanity instead of just kneeling. Well, I'm sorry. It's almost like I waxed poetic about this for a while on the Basketball Conference podcast because, Joey and Mike, and Joey is an alum of Georgia Tech. So after that game, they were waiting to go live, and Mike was the co-host of the show. He was just like, click it, go live right now. Just gonna want to hear the reaction. And when he had me on for the season recap, we talked about it. But like, that's just such a crater, like that's the gulf at the bottom of the ocean. Like, that one is just like, because if you can do that, right, it's the inverse of that player who normally runs 4.42, 4.4 flat, and one time runs 4.2 flat, laser timed. So you're like, you got that in you. So I'm trying to bring that 4.2 guy all the time because you just show me you can do it once. So I need it all the time. For me, in the back of my mind, Cristobal, you're doing these other good things, and we're trying to wall off the moron that we saw from the Georgia Tech game. So like, that's a negative. Continuing to lose to Florida State, negative. It's not in the same way as Ohio State and Michigan, where it's a one-game season, but that game matters more, and you got to stop losing that game. I get that they were all in on everything last year. Buddy, hell or high water, win this year. Continuing to lose to North Carolina, and like, I'm going to say what I'm going to say about North Carolina, but it also informs then the state of affairs at Miami. That's an extra regular-ass Carolina team. They're not special at all. They lose to also-ran teams. They barely struggle against Appalachian State. You got these lower-tier ACC teams beating them on the regular. Virginia, win. You got all that, right? But every time Carolina Blue plays orange, green, and white, they're the Monstars, 5 in a row and 7 out of 9, right? They look like they're Gulliver, stepping on the people of Lilliput, the Lilliputians and everything. Just like, okay, yeah, you can't stop me, layup, dunk, touchdown, whatever you want to call it, when they play us, right? They're Popeye with all the spinach when they play orange, green, and white, but they're a extra regular-ass team when they play everybody else. So then that also says, who's Miami if this extra regular-ass team is beating you 5 in a row and 7 out of 9? True and correct. But the fact that that has continued, that's one of the craters and a negative for me, because eventually you got to – Mac Brown is a fine head coach. I'm not going to say that he's bad or anything. But 5 in a row and 7 out of 9, miss me with that, bro. But like, the bad things are really bad. The good things, especially in terms of like talent acquisition, are pretty great. But like, as I've gone through this answer, the majority of the positive events are off-field things, and the majority of the bad events are on-field game results. And eventually, the off-field wins and positive results has to improve and affect in a positive way the on-field results. And that's a perfect example of the kind of experience and dichotomy of the experience of having, I said experience twice, sorry, but of having Mario Cristobal as your head coach. Signing day, you're tap dancing, doing backflips and cartwheels, but then random Saturdays during the fall, it's, we lost to Georgia Tech, or it's another year that we lost to Carolina, or you know what I mean? That's how I view things. But in general, positive, because the main thing was changing the structure and the composition of this the structure of the organization as a whole and the composition of this roster. But again, still up on stateoftheu.com, the recruiting rules that I wrote going on 5-6 years, it might be longer than that now. But the last recruiting rules, you have to win. You got to do. You can do all this other stuff, but if you don't win games, then you watch Jeremiah Smith sign and go and put on somebody else's jersey, right? You're gonna have all these things. You can only do but so much, but you gotta win these games, and that's the thing. If it doesn't happen this year, I'm going to have real serious concerns about the ability for it to happen with Mario Cristobal moving forward, because it couldn't be more perfectly lined up. It really could not.
Especially against the schedule they're playing, which Cam and I broke down a couple weeks ago.
Also, I did look up in the interim. Miami goes to SMU in 25, so Brashard Smith could still be there, and I'm sure that he would love nothing more than to have a big game against his hometown team.
The screw up against Georgia Tech doesn't even need to be addressed, so that's obvious. That's just a complete, as Cam has stated. The reason I bring it up is beyond that. What I didn't like was when I watched the post-game news conference, I was thinking, okay, is he telling the truth or is he lying? But regardless, one of two things is true. Either he was clueless about the situation, he just missed it. He just completely missed that. No, I guess three things could have been in play here, because you are pointing out the pursuit of getting 100 yards for
Donald Chaney Jr.
Donald Chaney.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking, if what he is telling us, again, whether it's the truth or a lie, he either, as the head coach, was, I can't imagine Mario Cristobal would be too shy, too lackadaisical to not intervene and just allow things to happen. He just, one version of it was that he just kind of let things play out, and that's not my job. And I just, well, of course it's your job. You are the last bastion. It all rides on your shoulders. You are the guy that is supposed to, if anything else is a definition of your job on the field, it's to prevent losses. It's to guarantee a sure win is going to be just that, when double zeros hit the scoreboard. Or whether he was too, again, not assertive enough to take action, or whether his football brain was not working and he froze and he just missed it.
I will say this in terms of, like, I missed it. You cannot fashion yourself to be the most detail-oriented, fastidious person in the world, right? That you know everything about everything in your program, that you have this exhaustive interview process that we alluded to earlier, that you know everything about everything, right? You know which players switch out their shoelaces on a Tuesday. You know everything, right? But then in the biggest moment of a game, you don't know anything. Like, you can't have it both ways, my boy. You cannot be, I'm the coach who knows every single thing about my program, all the way to, I'm Michael Corleone, right? I know everything that happens in the organization. I know who you had meetings with. I know who they had meetings with. I know who their daughter's, sister's, cousin, I know all of that and everything. I have all that knowledge because I'm fully dialed in. Huh? What? We're not supposed to take, wait, we're coming out in pistol and not kneeling. Huh? What? I don't know anything. You have built a career proving and saying that you're otherwise than that. So I'm not going to believe you all of a sudden. It's like, I big dumb jock. I play O-line. I don't know anything. No, you cannot have that. You cannot have that, because from the moment the first, you've said that you're not that person. And that's why I was doing this, which means that you're lying to my face and you're insulting my intelligence. And that's why I was fucking pissed. Like, you can't, because you're not. And you've gone out of your way, even when unasked, to say, I know every single detail. I know all of this. I have this knowledge. I'm dialed in. This is the process. I know it all. And then, oh, I didn't know. You can't. No, absolutely not. And I'm not going to cut you the slack of being a young coach, right? And saying, okay, well, this is the first time you learn and you grow from that. Like Manny Diaz, when he was talking about, it's hard to win because he went 0 for 5 after bye weeks through his first couple of years, right? It's like, the process of the bye week, and I'm trying to figure that out because I haven't done this before. It sucked, but there was a measure of understanding and saying, okay, now you have to stick with something and get a consistent process. You're not getting that benefit of the doubt from me. And I'm not going to believe it when you just try to, oh, shucks, your way through things. No, you messed up. Sit there and, chest to eye, like whatever, chin up and own that. But don't sit here and try to say, oh, well, I don't know. The detail might have gotten away from me. And da-da-da-da. You're the guy who's always said that no detail ever gets past you. Right? It's like, what movie? Finding Forrester. I don't know if you watched that movie, but like the kid, he's a basketball player in the Bronx. He goes to a private school. Da-da-da. He's really smart. He reads all the books and everything. And he goes over to Claire Dames' house because it was in the early 90s, yada, yada, yada. She has to study for a Shakespeare test. And then he's like, oh, one of the answers in the thing that the teacher always asks is like, when did Sherlock Holmes first meet Watson? And so Buddy's read all the books and he's like, oh, it was at this place at this time. So why I've read all the books, I know all the details. And then later when talking about their relationship, he's like, I don't know what you mean, I forget details. And she's like, how do you talk about forgetting details when you remember something from page 43 of one of the 947 books that about Sherlock Holmes was written? You remember those details. You can't sit here and say all of a sudden, I don't remember details. Same exact thing with Cristobal. You cannot say that because the whole time you've said, I am the guy who knows all the details and I don't forget anything. So in that moment, shut up about it, take the L, own your mistakes, and don't try to sit here and lie to my damn face. That's what gets me angry about it.
I'm with you. And if I had investment in the situation, I would be angry as well.
Good movie, though. Sean Connery, Rob Bell, Claire Danes, Sean Connery. Finding Forrester. You should look it up. And there's 2 choir scenes in there, by the way, also. Come on, guys.
You got it all there. And then for me with Mario, and I know you explained this and your thought process on the approach of this program when he took it over was he is tearing it down and building it back up so it could look messy the first year. Mm-hmm. But for me, I just couldn't get past, you got top 15 talent.
Mm-hmm.
I understand you're trying to reinvent some things. You're trying to change culture. You're trying to do all these things different. But how do you explain Duke? You get blown up by 3 scores and you turn the ball over 8 times. Middle Tennessee, they had more Keystone Cop moments in that season than anybody in the country.
You're right.
They had the worst, as we discussed at one point, the worst point differential as a favorite game to game than any team in the country.
Yeah.
Just repeatedly.
I mean, and especially buoyed by that Middle Tennessee game where they were where we were 3 touchdown favorites and lost by 4 scores, and gave up 40 in most of the games at home in Hard Rock Stadium. It was until this past year that we had won a conference game at home. You know what I mean? Like, a lot went wrong. But yeah, again, it's the disparity between recruiting wins and talent acquisition versus actual team performance. And like, I think that the Clemson game was a highlight. You find a way to win that game. I said it like that week that showed a little bit of growth in game operations and management. So we have gotten to the point where the second half early timeout early in the third quarter, that's been erased from operations mostly. So I'm going to knock on wood because it could rear its ugly head. But I'm fine early in the game of like, okay, it's the first drive, call timeout real quick. Hey, let's dial in. Let's change a couple of things because like what they're doing is very different than what we thought, and they're gashing us and everything like that, especially defensively. Cool. I'm fine with that one. But the second half one, because the timeout going into the fourth quarter is infinitely more valuable. But we've seen development there. Also in that game, there was a couple timeouts that were called on defense to give Lance Guidry the opportunity to get into the right play. And he did. Because remember, we had to come back in that game to tie that game. So there were a couple big third downs. It's okay, we're going to call timeout here, going to get to the right play, and did. And then when that happened in overtime, I started, complaining and I said, wait. The last 2 times this game, that there's been a timeout before a big defensive play, Cristobal's gone over to, you've seen him, he literally goes over to the huddle, rah, sis, boom, bah, coach, you got it, and step back. And every time Lance Guidry got to the right play, and that was before the 4th down, the game-winning play with Corey Flagg, who I believe also is going to SMU, but whatever. But I said, cool, I'm going to trust that this is another instance where this timeout gets us to the right play and gets the win, and it did. So you're seeing a little bit of development and things like that, but like, again, if I'm talking about the couple of times, it's not enough. I love the Texas A&M, Shannon Dawson. Hey, coach, are we going to run the ball? And he's like, hell no, I'm going to chuck it up there. We're going to win it right now. I love that. But there have been glimpses of development and improvement from an on-field standpoint. But there's, again, like Robert Frost says, miles to go before we sleep, miles to go before we sleep.